Well, thanks. It's fun to be with you guys tonight. Is it a little high? I normally don't use a mic, so I yell a lot. What Rod asked me to do is, come at this from the point of view of what I'm doing at Stanford, and along the way I'll talk about that. I mean, I've been teaching all my life, but I've been a teacher for just about 3 years. The stuff I was doing at Cal was very much on the side, and I'm now actually a full-time paid staff member of the faculty at Stanford University. I'm a lecturer. And higher there's lecturer, there's like non-existent slime mold. Then there's lecturer, which is imperceptibly higher than the slime mold. And then senior lecturer, then associate consulting professor, then assistant consulting professor, then consulting professor, then associate professor, assistant professor, professor, tenure professor. So I can't even see the guys that count. But nonetheless, I close the deal and I get to teach. So that's the faculty member from Stanford. But I do get to use the showers after hours, which is a big deal. And I get parking, which is probably the most important thing. Yeah. So I'm just going to come at this from the point of view of what I do, and stuff will come along. And they told me to talk for like 40 minutes and then interact with you for another 15 or 20. So that looks like an hour to me. But I've seen this material. So it's, while interesting to me, I'm well familiar with it. So I really don't need to hear myself say it again. At any point in time, you've got a question. Or like, so what, who cares? That's a really good question. Then stick your hand up, because if we are relevant to you tonight, we've done the right thing. If we just get through my slides and we're irrelevant, then we've done the wrong thing. That having been said, so who is this guy, okay, other than what Rod lied about? Well, it starts in the 70s. I'm 57 years old, okay, and I've got 8 adult children under my purview of interest. Including 5 I had something to do with spawning, and then 3 that they're spending a lot of time with, like wives and significant others. So it was the 70s. I mean, I just went to my 35th year college reunion very briefly. I just showed up for the mini reunion of the freshman dorm, because those are the people I went to jail with. So money on Harbor in 1971. I got upset with a couple thousand of my friends, and a few of us landed in jail. Mostly freshmen, because the freshmen are entirely too stupid to go, oh, those are the police, leave now. So when you're really fervent and stupid, you get busted. But then in 70, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with my life, but in 73 there was the first OPEC oil crisis, an hour-long lines at the gas pump where gas was actually approaching $1 a gallon. Oh my God! And I thought, okay, that's what I need. I'm going to solve the energy crisis. I arrived at Stanford thinking I was going to save the seas. Grew up in Southern California, had a beach house near Santa Barbara, spent a lot of time in the water. A lot of Jacques Cousteau's, the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, that he was my hero, so I wanted to work on the Calypso. He's old, he's going to die, someone's got to take on the work. So I was going to get paid to hang out with the SEALs. Okay. And that didn't work out, as it turned out. And then I floundered for a while, wasn't sure what to do, and then we had the energy crisis. So my next mission, because I was on a mission, was to solve the energy crisis. So I worked on that, and then I actually got a master's in thermosciences and stated mechanical engineering. I declared mechanical engineering in the winter quarter of my junior year. That's a bad idea, to try to finish an entire engineering degree in 5 quarters. You take 23 units of engineering every quarter. You're taking freshman physics and advanced thermodynamics at the same time. And the process is, you may remember 4 years ago from your initial physics course, we haven't covered that yet. Haven't covered that yet. What's going on? So I came out of Stanford completely confused, but with a degree. I hadn't learned anything, but I'd been there long enough for them to let me leave. And then 4 years later, I realized that Carter was not going to get reelected. That was not a deeply insightful political requirement. And once that was over, then the advanced energy technologies that I cared about were dead meat, because this was economically way ahead of its time. In fact, if I was graduating right now, I could start doing the stuff I wanted to do when I was 22. But I was a little early, so I fell into some other stuff. So I fell into high tech. So I worked for Steve when he looked like that. So I landed at Apple Computer in the early days. I showed up for work 6 weeks before the company went public. It's a long story as to how I got there. It starts with, I'm welding together some pipes to make a solar hot water heating test rig for a small startup company. I get a phone call from Apple Computer. They say, we want to talk to Dave Evans. And I said, you mean the one at Hewlett-Packard? Don't bother me, and hung up the phone. This is not an excellent interview technique, by the way. But many hours later, 14 interviews later, getting walked around the parking lot by hand, I took the job. And so I got to work on the mouse, and back when the logo looked like that. That was the very first Apple mouse. And then one day, my boss Trip Hawkins went into the then president of Apple and said, you know, you need a new VP of marketing, and I'm the guy, and I need your answer right now, because if we're not doing this, I got to go start my company. And so Mike Marklow then said, so, tell me about your company. And so he walked back to his office, stopped in my cubicle, and said, here's what we're going to do. You know, which is this company called Electronic Arts. And I said, well, was that a question or a statement? You know, kind of, you know, a girl likes to be asked. But yeah, it's a question, it's a question. You know you're going to do it. I kind of go, that's fine. And so we do this thing. And then, so I fell into high tech rather oddly, and did that for years. So I was a line guy for like 15 years. And then my mother was dying of cancer. At the time, I was VP of marketing for a voicemail company in the telecom industry. And I stopped out, and while I was stopped out, I began to do some independent consulting, which turned out to be a lot of fun. And I actually got to see my kids awake, which was an astonishing experience for them and for me. So I stuck with it, and I was a gainfully unemployed marketing guy for 20 years. And still am a little bit, in addition to being a teacher. So then I went to Cal in the way that, and that's really where I did meet Rod and Dan, as it turns out, and said, well, okay, sure, I'll try to teach this little course once. There's a way you can teach if students ask you to for, you know, like useless units. They're technically units, but they don't really count for anything. They're scumball units, you know. So I taught a 1-unit scumball class about, you know, finding your calling, which isn't like real, legitimate academic material. You know, you can get an education, but we have no interest in helping you know what the heck to do with it, you know, or why it actually matters to anyone other than the registrar. So I did that, and it went well. And the kids said, "Gosh, my friends want to take the class. Will you teach it again?" And I made a little deal in my mind that said, "You know, I'll keep showing up as long as they do." 14 semesters later, my sponsor quit and went to Vassar, and so I lost my venue. And I live in Santa Cruz, so it's a bit of a hike. And so I thought, well, maybe I could get a little closer to home. So I went over to Stanford, and that has actually turned into a shockingly successful thing, which I will explain some of. And that's how we got here to tonight. So I'm in the Stanford Design Program. 3.5 years ago, I called them up and said, I'm kind of interested in this stuff about helping young people figure out what to do with themselves. I think you, of all the people over at Stanford, might care for the following reasons. And it's a long story I won't bore you with. And I was expecting about a year's worth of occasional idea-exploring lunches with a guy that's now technically my boss, an old business friend named Bill Burnett. And we're 5 minutes into the conversation. He goes, I know exactly what you mean. I watch in my office all the time. We've got to do this thing. Let's start this fall. We'll do a prototype this summer. What's the deal? You know, 30 years in sales and marketing, and I didn't even bring an order book. I was going, holy cow, I can't, you know, I wasn't ready to close. So we closed the deal. We started this class, and off we go. And now I'm actually working there. I still have one consulting client I work with a half a day a week, and I make more money in the half a day a week with them than full-time at Stanford. So that will tell you about that. The Stanford Design Program. Anybody ever heard of design thinking? IDEO, Dave Kelly, design. Okay, that's the deal. And there's the D School, which is the institute that does research on design thinking and design methodology. And there's the design program that actually puts out unit-bearing courses and offers degrees, like a bachelor's or a master's in product design. And I'm in the design program, the degree-granting chunk of reality over at Stanford. And the reason I'm there is because it was the cleverest place I could pull off sneakily talking about these issues. So we're just using design thinking to design your life. Not a new mouse or an austerizer or a user interface for your smartphone. And so that's why I hang out. And the BHAG, who knows what a BHAG is? What's a BHAG?
Big, enormous, very wild-ass cat. No.
Okay, that was a lot more letters than you notice here. That was B-E-A, I mean, what else? But thank you, it was very entertaining, but it's actually wrong. Yes?
Big, hairy, audacious goal.
The big, hairy, audacious goal. Thank you very much. You're from Collins, and the big, hairy, audacious goal that I and my partners at Stanford have regarding this stuff is to fundamentally change college culture forever, recover formation as distinct from education, as de rigueur culturally within the educational world and the world at large, people like you, which would be evidenced specifically at Stanford by people saying things like, all students recognize they need to take intentional steps to find their vocation and voice while at Stanford or wherever they happen to be, and are aware of effective process support and enabling at the D School and the CDC, that's the Career Center, who helps fund my work. where thousands each year learn how to design their lives. So what my goal is that, within a couple of years from now, if you show up on the campus at Stanford, like, duh, you learn how to use design thinking to design your life. Who wouldn't get that done before you graduate? As well as get a degree, and have a lot of fun and get laid and get drunk. So, the usual goal list, so that's what I'm going for. So how are we doing that? And again, as I speak, I don't know how many of you either have young people work in your business, have young people live in your house, or have young people whose lives impact yours in meaningful ways, either to them or to you. So somebody between 18 and 32. If you've got 18 and 32-year-olds in your life at all, or you are one, okay, fine. That's most of you. Now, for those of you who didn't have your hand up, just hang out with us, okay? Because these principles, I believe, apply to everybody with a pulse. It's just, I'm currently working it with young people because they're painfully aware of the fact that they're not sure what to do with themselves. So what am I doing? What are my partners and I doing? We're using design thinking to design your life. I'll tell you what design thinking is later. We are developing competency in forming a coherent life. And a coherent life meaning that when who you are, what you do, what you believe, and why it matters to you are all part of the same thing. Your life is a singular fabric. It actually makes sense to you and those with whom you collaborate. We live in a terrifically bifurcated society, highly compartmentalized. The boss has got Monday through Friday, I get Saturday, the kids are God, or somebody gets Sunday. What do you want from me? I'm doing the best I can. Pay my taxes, don't bother me. And what do those things have to do with each other? Heck, I don't know. That's how a lot of lives are. And it's really tough to combat that. So a coherent life is what I'm going for. And I think and you can actually learn how to do that. Right? Look, puberty, quarter life, and midlife are hard. Anyone here know somebody who had a midlife crisis? That would include yourself? Okay. Yeah, so, and by the way, midlife's just weird. It's a crisis only if you got there badly. And in many cases, we're having a midlife crisis because that thing you took an incomplete in when you were 23 has come back to bite you in the butt. And so maybe if we started life a little more competently in these kinds of ways, we'd be in better shape. We are explicitly addressing formation as a part of college. It actually was an inherently obvious thing. How many of you went to college? Okay. It used to be true that, if you went to college, forming you into a constructive citizen was the primary goal, and you needed to know some stuff too. We completely lost that. When you go to college these days, there is somewhere between not much, poor, or absolutely no help whatsoever in figuring out who are you, what do you want to do, and why does that matter. We'll educate you. Just before you leave, we'll let you sign up for interviews and get you a job. But how to translate that thing you learned into what you want to do and where you would go with it, that's left to the reader as an exercise. In fact, you're just supposed to know. You're just supposed to already know. Not only do we not help you, we look at, so what is it you want to do? Well, no. Oh, I see. Why don't you go home and think about that? So you're already not having the answers, well, what is your passion? I don't know that either. Well, what was your childhood dream? Just to see Goofy in person. So currently, if you don't know the answer to the question what to do with yourself, you don't have your passion clearly identified, and you don't have a childhood dream you now want to realize, and the secret hasn't worked for you, despite the fact you paid for the damn book. You're really kind of screwed in the current milieu, and we think that's really kind of a crime. So we're responding to a situation that looks like this. And by the way, the next couple of videos I'm going to show you were not hard to do. This is what I deal with.